Welcome to the Teamwork Arts podcast. The idea, of course, is to try and go behind the scenes to figure out the thoughts behind the actions of the people who make the art. And art is something that's a little synonymous with Anubhav Nath. He's, of course, the director for Ojas Art and the man who provides the spectacular 1AQ venue for a lot of the musical evenings that we all shake our heads to and smile benignly at. So, Anubhav, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Sarthak, for that glorious introduction.
It's wonderful that you support what we do, of course, and the arts in the past few years has become a bit of a fraught subject, hasn't it? In more ways than one.
When was it not?
And yet you call it a profession and a passion.
Yes, I think to be an art professional is difficult. To say that you are an art professional, it is born out of a passion, whatever category it may be in, like be it a practicing visual artist or a musician,
sure,
or all of us who are involved in the arts, in producing arts, in the sense of producing events, art-related events. Like I run an art gallery, but at some level, I also feel that I'm also part of the whole system,
sure,
and it has to be born out of a passion, because just people look at the glamour of it, but there's just so much more that goes into it, and
sure,
we as professionals in the category have gone through all of that and
sure,
realize there's so much like work and grit and all
sure,
those good things.
But considering that, as you said, art is the cool thing to talk about, is the cool thing to be associated with, but people forget that there's a lot of grind that has to be indulged in. So how have you, and you've been in it for the long haul,
right.
How have you seen the scenario change from when you started? First of all, of course, when did you start, and then how have you seen that change?
When did I? So it's been a while since I started. I want to say at least it's been almost 15 years. So it's been a really it makes me feel really old also suddenly. There's a realization of age, but
Fine wine, I'm sure.
Inshallah. But so there's been a tremendous change in the way the arts have been perceived, and especially where I'm coming from. So I started into the whole visual arts when there was the economic scenario was a little different. India was going through that initial phase, that boom and all of
sure,
that. And my first few projects in the visual arts were around development work. Actually, it was something different I was trying. We did a 3-year-long engagement with inmates of the Tihar jail, where we did some fantastic art with them.
Sure.
The idea being reformation and rehabilitation of the inmates. But because of my friends and all in the arts, we landed up getting some artists to visit the jail with us, which resulted in us mounting an exhibition,
right,
which was like the first of its type back then,
sure,
where we had works by inmate artists and contemporary artists both in the same space, and that landed up being a very successful fundraiser for the Tihar Jail Welfare Fund.
Sure. And of course, especially nowadays, anything that's related to art also has become a bit of a statement as well, be it political, be it social. So the responsibility of art in that way has taken on a new dimension. Would you agree?
So art has always had that responsibility, and it's always carried that responsibility. In fact, coincidentally, today I was talking about some of the works that got made by a lot of our indigenous artists during the whole Corona lockdown.
Sure.
And how they portray that. There is a lot of anguish and fear and things that you see in the artworks.
Right.
But at the same time, there's also another dimension to it, a dimension of hope. But that has been the role of the arts. They've been a catharsis, so to say, especially during difficult times.
Sure.
And one did not address that or realize that or recognize that as much as we did in the last year,
sure,
where each one of us individually felt that it was the arts which kept us afloat, and it was the arts which kept us going. And
sure,
be it radio podcasts, be it programs on TV, television, on radio, reading, literature,
sure,
all of a sudden I remember I got so many phone calls from friends about where could they buy art material.
Right.
Just because there was this innate need to kind of express themselves, and they thought it was what better way than painting, trying painting, things like that. And porn.
Yeah.
That is also art. That's another art form.
But talking of porn, there's also financial porn that's a little more associated with art nowadays. I mean, coming back to that whole thing about art as a statement. Particularly visual art, I think there's been a bit of a skew there, as you said. On the one hand, there's traditional artists who are literally having to fight for every morsel. On the other hand, of course, in the international markets, a Raza will sell for millions, and a Bindu will become financial as well.
So it's very interesting that you bring this up, because it was in the lockdown that we had records being made for high value art.
Absolutely.
The most expensive artwork of the most expensive Indian painting to be ever sold happened in this lockdown in auction. The second most expensive painting to be ever sold also in this auction.
Which I think was the Raza, wasn't it?
No, it was a Gaitonde.
It was a Gaitonde.
And what's very interesting is that it was not just the case for Indian art, but auction records have been made the world over in different genres, right? From European art to classical to contemporary, post-war art.
Sure.
There have been records made in all genres of art during this lockdown, which really perplexes us. And makes us think as to how it happened, but it did happen.
The question that also comes into my mind about this is that it also creates a bit of a false sense of opulence for a form that might not really.
So the thing is, when we talk about high art, we have to understand that high art is a lot of it is to do with investment values.
Sure.
And so if you have to talk to investors for that.
Sure.
Like people who can give you expert advice in investments.
Right.
And all of them just suddenly feel that art is a much safer investment. And there is a certain intrinsic value to the arts which other investments don't have.
Sure.
To give you an example, a person may have $10 million, pounds, etc., whatever, in their bank account, but they cannot display it, they cannot show it. Whereas you could have a painting, an artwork of a similar price point, and it could be displayed in your house, and it becomes a very elegant statement. Whereas talking about money in the bank is crass, unacceptable.
But high art, of course.
It absolutely is a different thing. People come in, they see it, they're impressed, and at the same time that investment is growing, because there are few people who are going after those kind of works, and more or less they seem to be recession proof.
Sure.
We've heard about that whole K economy thing coming up right now.
Right.
So they are probably members of the upper bar of the K.
Of course.
Yeah.
There's also this aspect of your work that involves encouragement of upcoming artists.
Right.
Considering that, as you said, it's high value investment as well. What is your process of supporting a new artist?
So we've been doing a lot of work in the indigenous arts,
Right.
essentially the tribal and traditional arts of India, like the Gond, Bhil, Varli, these kind of art forms. These are the genres we work in. And the Ojas Art Award, which happens in partnership with the Jaipur Literature Festival and Teamwork Arts, has been very instrumental in that.
Right.
So every year we go after a new genre,
Right.
and we invite applications. It's a democratic award, and what's landed up happening is that we've been able to create very, very interesting and rich databases of artists, which were really not known. People, at least in the private space, in the private gallery space, people didn't know who the artists were. But because of the award, we've been able to get all these names and collect all these data points. And in the last 5 to 7 years itself, I want to say there has been a tremendous interest in this category of arts. And for any art to become a system, an economic system, or just a holistically viable system, sustainable system, there are different aspects required. I'll just go over them really briefly and really quickly. Of course, you need artists, you need gallerists, collectors, museums, writers, dealers, auction houses, and the museums or institutions. So you need 8 or 9 of these people to make any system sustainable.
Right.
And we saw that happen with Indian art as well, like Indian contemporary mainstream art. in the 2000s, the early 2000s, when all of these aspects got very strong.
Sure.
And that's how there was a big boom in the art market, so to say, which continues,
Sure.
you know, and it has taken the masters that we talk about to different price point levels. So similarly now for the tribal arts, also we are seeing this happen. There are more galleries that are interested in this. Of course, we've always had the artists,
Right.
but you know, you need all these others to support the artist and to then help catapult him or her into the right direction.
Sure.
And though it would be incorrect for me to say that like the economic thing is the best way to judge it. No, not at all. There's aesthetic value which cannot be put into monetary terms.
Sure.
But having said that, with monetary terms, as soon as there's a big monetary term attachment to something, it just becomes precious in a more public kind of way.
Sure.
You know, it's immediately like, oh, that thing is for so much, so
sure.
it's so valuable.
For sure.
You know, unfortunately or fortunately, money is the one language that kind of is an equalizer for everything.
For sure. Which is, of course, another thing that I wanted to ask, which is that considering that you are associated with the upcoming talent, what according to you is the quality of the talent that there is currently? And more importantly, what do you think is the quality of support for that talent that exists as well?
I'm glad you bring this up because it's the support which is very important.
Yes.
There's a lot of talent in all kinds of art,
Right.
not just visual arts, everywhere. But mentorship is something that we don't talk about very often, but mentorship I think is the key to success.
Sure.
And we've seen that, I've seen that at work even in at the Salam Balak Trust where I'm involved,
Right.
where we work with street and working children essentially. And we've had very successful programs in photography for the children where they've been able to not only use photography as a tool for, rehabilitation, that is, they become commercially successful photographers, but also they've been able to establish themselves as a name.
Right.
You know, and have their works as part of curated shows the world over, in museums, like their works are in important collections. Similarly, we've seen the same with puppeteering.
Right.
You know, we have Dadi Padamji,
Of course.
who works very closely with our children.
Right.
And he has created some marvelous puppeteers, ensuring that the tradition continues, and plus providing them with a way of livelihood, with a means of livelihood.
Sure.
And then similarly in dance, in contemporary dance, we had the same thing with like Ashta Debu, whom we lost last year.
Yeah.
And he was very much into working with marginalized communities and helping them discover a new sense of identity for themselves through the arts. So the arts, the beauty of the arts is that they are very accepting.
Sure. Which, of course, finally brings me to this one question that I would certainly like you to answer, which is the fact that there's lots of people who are seduced by the glamour aspect of art. With stars in their eyes, they start to practice their art, so to speak. And you've been there. I'm sure you've seen many of these stories. Some of them successful, some of them not so much. What advice would you give someone who wants to start in the arts and would probably not know where to go?
So for a visual artist, I would say that think of also having a fallback plan.
Right.
Because of two reasons. Number one is that the success rate is very, very, very small. It's almost minuscule.
Sure.
You know, it's like for that one artist who does a successful solo show, there are thousands who've not been able to get there.
Sure.
So, and do think of having a real fallback option, because you know, it is very sexy to think that you're going to be the one out of the 10,000.
Absolutely.
And more power to you for becoming that one out of 10,000.
Sure.
But one should not put all their eggs in one basket, so to say. So I would say, think of having an alternate career / option to fall back on, and then go ahead and practice and do whatever it takes to get there.
Excellent. Anubhav Nath, deep gratitude for doing what you do for us and for the community, for the art community in general. But we'll be selfish and say that 1AQ has become a bit of a home for us.
Absolutely.
Those wonderful musical notes. That
And I can't wait for those to be back.
Yes.
And
Yes.
hopefully this is started now.
Yes.
And it should continue. There should be a continuum.
Absolutely.
And yes, thank you very much for always being here.
And thank you for being such a gracious host and such a generous sharer of knowledge. So words of wisdom. Thank you for that, and thank you for being on the Teamwork Arts podcast. Anubhav Nath, ladies and gentlemen, director of Ojas Art Gallery, and of course the man behind 1AQ. If you haven't seen the venue in Delhi, I seriously suggest that you do, because it'll leave you with that mouth open and then that little smile that looks so good on you. Time to go. This is the Teamwork Arts podcast, ladies and gentlemen.